Hey folks, it is in UTC the 23rd of June, 2021. This is the weekly meeting of SIG Docs at the APAC friendly time. I'm Tim Bannister. Let's have a weekly meeting. How's everyone doing? I don't see any new contributors, but I will screen share the agenda. Actually, let me dig that out now. Cool. So you should be seeing a screen shared agenda. This week's PR wrangler is Savitha Raghunathan. Next week's PR wrangler is me. I do know my scheduled PR wrangler shifts. Let's talk about the upcoming release. Do we have any update from the release team? I'm guessing, is it on, Chris?
Yeah, I'm on the release team. I don't have a new status for us. I knew it had some problems. The spreadsheet had difficulties, and I believe Victor has gotten those straightened out. Other than that, I don't have an update.
Okay, good to know. Let's move on. There is a pull request. I'm going to open this and have a look. Cleaning up the owner's aliases file. Okay, so this is, I think, mostly a public sort of information announcement. This is going to clean up and remove some folk. Castro Joe from various groups, Steve Perry, 53, and ZP Arnold. Adding a SIG lead from SIG release, which is just a copying over, and also updating some release engineering people. Any questions on that? I think this is mainly on the agenda as an FYI. Okay. We could definitely do with increasing the pool of reviewers in SIG Docs. So what would folks like to do about that?
How do we go about that? Is there like would they have to review an amount of docs, or are they kind of I don't know, what's the criteria to be a reviewer?
I would say I'm open to there being a bunch of different pathways to being a SIG Docs reviewer. For example, someone who's a reviewer for another SIG or who has done plenty of reviewing for another SIG and hasn't contributed much to docs. I think there's not a big barrier of evidence to say if you're reviewing for another SIG and you want to review for SIG Docs, I think we'd be like open to doing that. We would assume good intent. These reviewing is kind of a privilege, and there are grounds for not giving it to just the whole internet. We wouldn't just give it to everyone who's on GitHub, otherwise we would have a defaced website pretty quickly. But the aim is more about including people than it is about excluding people. If you are new to contributing in Kubernetes, we want you to be an org member, but actually you can be someone who is reviewing without being an org member. You can be, we want to increase the pool of people who are doing reviews, whether they are doing that as people whose LGTMs count, or they're just people who are doing that as people who contribute by providing good feedback to other contributors.
Yes, I am all for it, for having more reviewers.
So how should we do this? How should we go about getting more people doing reviews? And then relatedly, how should we go about giving more reviewer rights out to people who will benefit from having them?
One of the hard things seems to be getting the experts to come in and do a review when it's something, say, beyond what some of the docs team like myself might be able to do. So maybe I've been trying to figure out how to get in the PRs I'm working on, how to get people to review them, and maybe showing up to some of their meetings and saying, hey, we have 3 or 4 PRs that are, particularly in your guys' wheelhouse. Can we get people here to commit to it? Because you just send out notices and a lot of times you don't get any response at all. I don't know if you found that to be the case as well.
Yeah. Well, for technical reviews, I think that's a little bit different because you have to have some sort of expertise in that context of that part of the documentation to do a more technical review. Yes, I agree. Sometimes you do have to privately ping people on Slack to get a technical review. That's not uncommon. So, or also reaching out on these various different Slack channels for the various different SIGs of that context is another avenue. After, of course, making the comments and pinging people on GitHub on the GitHub PR. Yeah. So yeah, it's been known. I guess it's I've experienced that, and yeah, it is a little more work to get a technical review, but a technical review is needed in order for a document that needs a technical review to make it into release. So if that SIG does want that documentation updated, it has to have a technical review, and so just no way around that.
So Tim, you were talking about just a regular docs review, not necessarily one that requires the technical.
Well, so let's say, what I'd say in the case of things, whether they're going into a release and documenting a feature for an upcoming release, or it's something on the main branch, I think that we are more looking for the person who does the nagging, who engages with the other SIG, rather than with the person.
That makes sense.
So we're looking for the person who says, "Hey, SIG, whatever, could you find someone?" That's a piece of work that we do, and yeah, that might mean going to a weekly meeting of that SIG. It might mean posting in the PR reviews channel of Kubernetes, which you can do if things are not going well. But we need someone doing that role. We want someone who identifies when a tech review is needed, and can make a good call on that as to this is a change that is well understood or it's not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that kind of thing myself. That's great. I've been trying to do it, but haven't limited success. That's why I was saying maybe going to meetings and getting actual people to say, yes, I'll do it would be helpful.
Did I see you unmute, Jimmy?
Yes. So the fact is, actually, we do mention some SIG groups when reviewing some articles, some changes, but those mentions do not work well. So I'm wondering whether we can have some kind of a list nominating some focal points from each and every relevant SIGs, just as we have a list of PR wranglers. We can ask help from other SIGs. So next time we know who is the person for technical RGTM.
There is a place for this you could find the technical reviewers within the kep.yaml file for a kep. It's a lot of of hunting down, because with the documentation you have to find what kep is aligned with the documentation. Then through that kep you could find the technical review, but it is difficult to find because you would have to have some kind of knowledge of that doc PR and what related kep that doc PR is for.
Yeah.
So let's come back to that. That sounds like a useful thing to talk about in its own right, I think. So we also want to grow the reviewer pool for the blog, which is really sparse right now. I would say we have 2 and a bit active approvers. One of whom is me. Actually, I'm not officially an approver, so I think I'm going to put myself forward. But really, the thing I would love to achieve is that someone else steps forward and I can endorse, more people. And rather than doing all the approving myself, I'd love to help other people step up to that role. Any thoughts on how we can encourage folk from, I guess, from any background as well? Like, there's no background that we're looking for in terms of reviewers and improvers, whether you're volunteering, whether you're doing it in your fully professional capacity, something else.
There was a question a few weeks ago about having meetings to discuss the blogs, and I don't know if that ever came about, if there have been any meetings for people who are interested, because I think there were several people who said they were interested in working on blogs. I don't know if that happened.
Would anyone, especially a person named Chris, be willing to take that forward and coordinate those meetings a bit more?
Yeah, I'll do that, because we have a channel, so I can post it on the channel and just pick a date and try to hold a meeting. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you need resources, like you want to find out a Zoom link that you can use, that kind of thing, that's the sort of thing that there are folks in SIG Docs who can help you get hold of that if you're not sure.
Okay. No, that sounds great. Actually, someone did also ask me about the blogs, in particular, the release team. How in the past have they worked with SIG Docs to put out blogs for the releases? Have you been through that, or Ray, have you been through that in a release?
Shall we put that on the agenda as a separate topic as well, like the
Yes.
release and blog?
Yes, that would be great.
You happy for that, Ray?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So with blogs, there, I remember there used to be a separate meeting for blogs that met less frequently. I believe it might have been every 2 weeks or so. But someone with from the blogs team would generally introduce themselves on this meeting as well. Usually midway through the release, or even earlier through the release, just to introduce themselves as part of the blog team for the 122 release. Then usually I would refer them to the Slack channel for SIG Doc blogs. They do have a separate Slack channel where they could ping for reviews, also ping for request any help as well, and also get more info on the blog meeting and the cadence for that meeting.
My recollection is, if you rewind a good number of months, I've heard people saying we could really do with more people joining the blog group, and that was that call went out. I don't think it was particularly well answered, and I think that what was left has meant that the people left running the blog activity haven't had the cycles, and it's kind of dwindled, and that's a challenge. I think, like, we were relying heavily, I think, on a mixture of volunteers and perhaps too heavily on a few people at the CNCF. The challenge is that those CNCF people have switched away from that, leaving kind of nothing, no support, revealing there wasn't much support there. That's my take on it. I don't know what other people think.
I could try to step up and get, or at least get a meeting and get us to discuss it. So it would be nice to maybe offline talk to someone who has gone through the process and know what it entails. I mean, is it different? Maybe it's just like doing anything. You just have to do do PRs and get them reviewed, and or if there's more to it than that, need to know that.
We might have recordings on YouTube. So we say, we record all these things, and I'm not sure how popular the videos are, but I mean, my first suggestion, Chris, is have a look on YouTube if you're willing to do that, and see if you can find a recording, and that will, you know, through the application of watching, probably on double speed, a bunch of meeting recordings, you can work out how the things used to go. And if you don't find them, I guess we don't have the recordings.
Okay, no, that sounds fine. I'd like to give that a shot, because and also just to figure out, you know, what are the kind of things per release that they try to do. Do they have standard kinds of blogs they do, or basically just anyone who can write about new features, or how that works?
I mean, in terms of what I will also say, that in terms of what is actually published, we have the blog, like we have every blog article started life as a pull request for at least for the past few years. And so you can have a look at the pull request. And I realize that's, you know, reconstructing history, but, you know, we have a bit of forensic approach to process, inferring it from what we saw happened.
Okay, well, I will try to get something started before next week's meeting then, and try to report on something that will light a fire under me to you know, get started on it then.
I do think it's okay to suppose, and to, you know, maybe put a message in, say, SIG Docs blog or on a pull request saying, I believe this is the case. I believe this is the approach we would take. I have certainly, both before becoming a reviewer and afterwards becoming a SIG Docs reviewer, put in a review saying, hello, I'm trying to help. Here is how, you know, my feedback. I might be wrong, but this is what I believe, you know, you need to know to move your PR forward. And it's okay to have incorrect beliefs, you know, if you're acting with good intent. Like, we're not expecting perfection, even from reviewers. It's absolutely fine, I think, generally, when you're reviewing, to have that humility to say that as a reviewer, you could be completely wrong. You know, if anything, I should do more of that humility, you know, even though I'm a tech lead.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't mind being foolish, so I will give it a shot.
I have another idea. You know, I'm not sure tentative reviewers. I mean, for issue, we can provide a label for help wanted, but I'm not sure we can get help wanted label. We can put help wanted label to PR, so that tentative reviewers check which one they can be volunteered as a tentative reviewer. So if we provide the kind of label, then we can post somewhere. We invite any reviewers, tentative reviewers, so that they can be official reviewer of KE website, Kubernetes website.
So I want to clarify what you just said there. You might be saying one of two things. So let me ask. Are you suggesting that we highlight which PRs are good for someone who is reviewing to pick up and review?
Yes.
Or are you asking for a label to highlight PRs which are easy to review, and, you know, like the same way that a good first issue label says this should be an easy issue to resolve, this label might be saying you can review this and it's not going to be a really difficult thing to get the reviewing work done?
Yeah, maybe we can apply to both approach. Per issue, we have help wanted label and good for first issue, good for first job. But it is they can be also applicable to initiation of reviewing job. Sometimes assigning reviewer is not enough. Maybe there are lots of pool for tentative reviewer, so we can somehow invite them so that they can be grow up as a official reviewer and approver.
So I have a view on this, which is that any PR which doesn't have LGTM and is open is reviewable. And if it does have LGTM, you can still review it, but you're adding less value.
Sure, but they are not sure. We know we can review any PR, we can initiate, but some new contributors may not know they can review that one because our GitHub system assign the tentative reviewers already in the PR, and sometimes we PR wranglers assign a reviewer. So in that case, they may not touch.
I think that first case is one we should handle through communication. My take is, let's make it super clear to people that when you see a bot assigning a review and recommending a reviewer, that's saying, well, my understanding is that's saying the bot thinks these people should review. And to be honest, with the website repo, that process doesn't work so well. It might work better for some of the other Crown managed repos. I don't know. But yeah, it doesn't work super great for the website. We actually have a mechanism which has gone stale for nominating reviewers per page. And perhaps we should have an issue about clearing that up. In fact, I'm going to. I don't know how that affects localizations. So typically localized pages don't keep the front matter localizers. How do localizations face and address the reviewers? Is that something that is generally similar to what the English upstream docs are having, or is it better? Is it worse?
In localization team, there are fewer reviewers than the English reviewers, and we try to make more pull in contributing localization itself. Then if there are many people are working on localization, then among them, we can bring up them as reviewers and then approvers. But we also facing pure reviewers and approvers. So sometimes we also post help for localization review as well to Kubernetes Korea user group and those communities, so that they can also start from review. They can start from translating new document, or they can start review first.
So I want to capture maybe a couple of comments. I'm not really sure I can echo that back and summarize what you said there, but are there a couple of steps that you would say that the Korean localization takes, for example, to specific actions you take to make sure that there are the pool of reviewers is big enough?
Sure. In localization, we also have PR wrangling system. So in our Korean localization tri-weekly meeting, we select a PR wrangler for current development localization branch, so that she or he can assign approvers, assign reviewers, and then if there are LGTMs, then assign approvers so that the PR can be completed. So we are using PR wrangling system. But sometimes there is no response from assigned reviewers. In the case, we already noticed that if there are no reaction from assigned reviewers for that PR, then we wait at least 3 days.
So,
and
sorry, say again.
We PR wrangler wait response from assigned reviewer, whether the reviewer can take review for the PR. Sometimes people not responding, so we check, and then if the reviewer does not respond, then we change to another reviewer, and we have agreement on that.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. I wonder, any more thoughts on, anyone else got thoughts on how that would affect the experience? Like maybe there's something about the experience of contributing that is, and currently, that is putting people off. And if there's anything negative we're doing, that is, go ahead. I thought I heard someone, sorry. If there's anything negative that we're doing, what can we do to not do that?
So I have some points about contributing. So for especially for PR reviewing, so we do have some guidelines about reviewing PRs, and those guidelines are so long, so complicated. For example, sometimes I want to refer people to one of our guidelines that is, we don't review changes to blogs which is older than 1 year. So I want to refer people to that then, but I cannot find it. It's so complicated. It's like a book. Can we somehow simplify these guidelines to make it more simpler for new reviewers?
That is a really good point. Jimmy, if you open an issue about that now, if you're willing to open an issue about that now, please feel very free to copy me in on that, and I will take work on that. If not, I will put an action on myself to open that issue. Which way do you want to do it?
Okay, cool.
Thanks. I think that's going to be, I think that action is going to help, because the feedback I'm hearing here is that we are putting reviewers off by making it hard for them to work out what their job would be. And if we do that, at the moment, we're not going to be effective at growing a pool of reviewers, because people will look at that and say, oh, I'm clearly, there's some people will look at that and say, I'm clearly not up to the job of reviewing. I don't understand these guidelines. It couldn't be right. Whereas with that suggestion, if we address it effectively, we can then look at growing the pool of reviewers, because people who come along and look at that guidance will feel that it makes sense to them, and that they, I think, are empowered to follow it and help out. So I feel like that's one of the more useful steps we can take immediately. What do other people think?
Yeah, maybe something like a cheat sheet that just says, too long, don't read. And that there's like immediately something you could click on to get to there.
We could mention that in the PR template.
Yeah. I really only started working in the with the Kubernetes docs really just a few months ago. So some of it's still pretty fresh in my mind, even though, I did some work a few years ago. So, and one of it was, yeah, when I see reviewers assigned, when I first saw that, I didn't know that then anyone could jump in and review, since it did have reviewers on it already. So that would be a nice thing. If you click, go to a cheat sheet, it says anyone can review, even if there are others assigned. Do it before LGTM, that kind of thing, as much as possible. I think that would be great. So good
Cool.
point.
We've spent a while on this. Are people having to move on to the next bit of the agenda? Cool. Branch rename. If you're calling it the master branch, you need to update because it's called the main branch now. Well done, Jim, for coordinating that. Well done, WG Naming, for coordinating that. We're moving forward. Bit of a challenge. I don't envy K/Kubernetes having to do the same thing, but it's going to get done one day. Also, thanks to all the people who made the infrastructure to give us buttons to do the hard work and so on. It's a lot easier when you've got a button that does the hard work for you. Any more thoughts? Okay. Slack meetings. This is ties in with the question about blog meetings quite heavily, Chris. SIG Contributor Experience holds some of their meetings in Slack via threads in a dedicated channel. We have four weekly meetings in a month. One at this time, 3 at another time. Do we want to try maybe having a different pattern where some of those meetings in a month are replaced with a Slack chat? I saw a nod there, maybe from Silko. Sorry, I can't pronounce your name so well. Any more thoughts? I saw a bit of a nod. Ray, thoughts? Jiming?
Is this just for the APAC meeting, or is this for?
It could be for what we want to do.
Okay.
So for APAC meeting, a monthly meeting is still good. I don't think we need some change for that.
Yeah, and I agree. It's not as frequent. I mean, it's once a month, so I agree with Qiming on this. I'm not in APAC, by the way.
I guess we could have a Pacific cadence meeting on a monthly cadence as well. If we did that, and I realize we're in the wrong time zone to really, talk about the people who usually join that meeting, what difference would that make to people? Are people worried about losing that contact? Are people happy to get their hours back? Any thoughts?
Personally, when I can make the meeting, I do enjoy it. Depending on what I guess my role. I guess for that time, if I'm working on a release, or if I'm not, but I do tend to enjoy it. But I know with my schedule personally that I'm getting busier and busier every week, it seems like. So
one thing I'll add, I don't know if this is worth minuting, but it would increase the gap between, I don't know. I'm thinking out loud here. Would it increase the gap between actually saying hello to a new contributor as a hello in a meeting? Because saying hello on Slack is not the same as being able to wave at someone and say, hey, it's great to see you, because you don't see them.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's not the same on Slack versus in a meeting. And personally, from just being part of releases, and this might change since we're going to a 3 release cadence per year instead of 4. That's it's a meeting is also a place to signal for help for reviews or to signal what is coming up. Just dates in terms of important dates for the release, and just another place to signal. Yes, we could always have signal in Slack as well when needed, but
I mentioned the and-on code. That is a thing that Toyota used to use in their factories to be able to call a supervisor over if you were having difficulty assembling things and so on. But yeah, calling for help. I'd like to move on from this discussion and not make a conclusion here. I think we should discuss it at the next meeting as well. So if people are okay, I'm going to move on to the Korean update. Right, Korean update.
Thank you. I just hope to update Korean localization team, and I hope to share the Korean localization milestone. And as you know, we are using branch changing, and we have our own development localization branch for 2 weeks, and then we keep changing. And current localization branch is KO5, and we have we make announcement before after we generate that branch. So you can check the milestone announcement, and based on this announcement, it is an issue, and we share it to other Korean community, so that they can be invited as a new contributor. And then we put the schedule. We have also, similar with English, we have PR please, and we have merge target. After we merge this branch to main branch, and then we initiate another upcoming branch again. Also, we can go to the meeting note, and we also make issue to update outdated Korean document. We basically check changes during our one milestone, changes in English document in one milestone, and then we report the outdated files that can be applied to Korean document, and then we resolve this outdated contents in KO5 branch. We don't merge KO5 branch to main branch unless this issue is not resolved. Okay, I just shared Korean localization milestone. Do you have any question regarding Korean localization milestone, or can I keep going? It is to just sharing Korean team update.
Carry on, I think.
Okay, thank you. And in case of Korean team, we had bi-weekly meeting, but we decided to change it to tri-weekly meeting because we are losing participants to our bi-weekly meeting. So to make more people in one meeting, we changed the schedule. I hope to share, nothing to discuss. And then the last one is election for new Korean localization team leader. Currently it's me, Soko, but my duty as the team leader will be finished on July. I did it around 1 year. and we have some tentative schedule to get to proceed with the election. So that's all for the Korean localization team. Thank you. Do you have
Thank
any...
you very much, Silko.
Okay. So maybe if there are nice there could be a new, you will see new Korean localization team leader if we are lucky. But I'm not sure there is new someone apply this event. I'm not sure. If there is no no candidate, then maybe I should keep this job. But hopefully there will be, yeah, new candidate for team leader. Thank you.
Something has just popped into my mind, which I'm going to share, which is Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
We have, as in Kubernetes has a Twitter feed. And some of these things that were coming up here, we might be able to share as tweets. There's a mechanism being added in draft to make it easier to tweet out as this Twitter handle. So I'm not sure what level of detail would be, appropriate to share. We can find out. But this is stuff that is aimed at contributors, and a call to action to say, hey, if you're a contributor who speaks Korean, here's some ways to get involved. One of which might be docs. Could be useful, maybe. The same for other languages. If you speak Chinese, there'll be similar mechanisms to get involved in things. Not just docs, there'll be different bits of ways to get involved. There might be a meeting. There might be some projects which have an APAC friendly weekly meeting, that kind of thing. Generally, my advice is, be general. If you're tweeting at a whole community, try and include people and try and reach that community in lots of ways of interest, rather than narrowly, I've released my new thing, or here is this particular team that you want to know about. But the mechanism is there, and I think I'll try and revisit it when the new mechanism is out, and promote this to people in SIG Docs to say, we can do this tweeting. I mean, I'm saying that to someone who's not on Twitter myself, but it might be relevant to folks who are.
So by the way, what is Twitter? We don't have that in China.
Well, yeah, not everyone who speaks Chinese is in China, but I appreciate the vast majority are, and there's plenty of localizations. So this is of general interest. I appreciate China is a special case, and there are websites you can't reach into China and that aren't used in China. Still relevant to Korea, right?
Yeah. Yes, we sometimes post announcement of Korean localization team to other community, Korean society, but the Twitter channel is also useful. Let us use that Twitter channel if we have anything important to announce.
Sure. And that's not to say that if for example, for China, there are other websites that I'm not going to be particularly familiar with that are going to be have a better reach. If you want to reach people using a different channel, you can. Nothing stops you doing that. But there is this general thing that contributor experience are trying to set up to reach as global an audience as we can, and that's that Twitter handle I mentioned. Should we move on?
Sure.
Cool. Jiming, back to you. You mentioned this just earlier, reviewing and people in other SIGs.
Yeah, so that was my experience from the OpenStack community. in that community, we have focal points for each and every sub-communities. For example, if we want some API to be conformant, to be formed in a good way, you will have a focal point for that. So in Kubernetes, I'm wondering if we can have a list of focal points for each SIG. For example, for a SIG node, maybe it has none. For kube admin, maybe neolith, so on and so forth.
Yeah. So this sounds like something that we might want to take to maybe the Kubernetes contributors channel on
Yes.
on Kubernetes Slack,
Yeah.
and try and kick off a discussion there. Let me just check I've got the name of that channel right. Yeah, Kubernetes contributors. Okay, so what I can do is I can ask on that Slack workspace. I'm happy to ask that, but anyone who's a contributor, and if you're in this meeting, you're contributing to Kubernetes, is welcome to join in that discussion as well. Any more on this? Okay, and then blog release liaison. I think let's try and spend not so much time on this. I think we've gone a little bit over the official time, but I'm happy to talk about blog and release for a bit. Chris and Ray, I'm going to call on you to. Chris, I think you had a question, and Ray, I think you might have felt you had an answer.
Yes. Okay. So for the Kubernetes blog, for the blogs for the release, there was an opt-in process that was started last release cycle, where SIGs would opt in if they would want their enhancements for release to have a blog post, and that kind of starts off. That's the first step in a blog for release. The blogs team will follow up with those SIGs as well, and also the release blog team would usually come to the SIG Docs meeting midway to the release and just introduce themselves, and then reach out to the SIG Docs blog team, either usually on Slack first. And I don't know what the meeting cadence is, but I've seen most of the communication is via Slack. Most of the blogs are released after the release, but of course they have to be reviewed. They have to be reviewed before the release date. This is always a time crunch. the first blog on the release is the actual release blog, and that has always been a time crunch to get written and to get reviewed as well. It's always been, it's not always been, but it's the past few cycles, it seems like it's been the very last minute. Then the other blogs tend to be, no, I don't want to say most of them, but some of them tend to be in a better position in order, to be ready for their release. Yeah, and as far as a release liaison, that's pretty much the role of the release blog team. So I know there's been some sad news with the cycle on the blog lead. So Divya and other release members like Savita and Divya have stepped up and to help leading with the blog. With the blog team. So yeah, so Divya is a good resource if you have more questions on the release blog process. So Savita,
who is leading the release blog team for 1.2.2?
You mean
Well,
the comms team are you talking about?
yes, yeah, the comp team. Yeah.
Yeah, Jesse Butler. JESSEEBUTLER.
Is that accurate, Ray, that what I've put?
Yes, yes. Yep, that is accurate.
So you said that, so the first one to go out is the main release blog.
Mhm.
So what was sort of the cadence of the others? Like how soon after did they come out?
I don't recall what the cadence.
But not
every few
immediately.
days. No,
Well, I can
it's
speak to that a little bit. What I've seen is that the post-release blogs are scheduled and they are go out on weekdays with at least a 1 day gap between them. So typically you might go out on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, leaving gaps for any other announcements that need to come out. So if Kubernetes needs to say, oh my gosh, we've just found a security hole, don't use such and such a thing, they've got a day where there's a slot for it. Or any other blogs that come in at the same time can sort of fit in. So let me I'll put that as a point. Leaves 1 day gaps and goes out on Tues and Thurs as gaps. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it sounds like the idea is just to stay in the news for, from when the release comes out to till the blogs run out, I guess, right? Is that how it works, kind of? Yeah.
So we can also have pre-release articles. So I don't know how the big one we wanted to get for as a pre-release article, I don't know how well we did with that, was around pod security policy deprecation. And plan A was to have an article go out before release, followed by a post-release article. And I don't think we actually got that, but that was the aim. And we would be aiming on a similar thing. If we had do you know what? We have a deprecation coming up. We have Ingress beta APIs disappearing. And I would like to see 2 articles go out about that. I should probably talk to Jesse Butler about this, in fact. I think that would be a good idea. Yeah. So what I'm saying with this is that what we might do is have an article before the release saying, you know what, in the next release, you won't be able to use beta APIs for Ingress because they're disappeared. They're already deprecated and they're going in the v1.2 release. They just won't be there anymore. And then post-release, we can have an article saying they're gone. Like, going back and look at our other article, kind of thing. Like, I'm not saying what the article should be, but that's the cadence you'd have. You'd have some article saying, well, the release is coming out soon. This is what you need to know. Another article a day after release saying, we did tell you. Roughly, but not that public nuance.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. Cool. This is helpful.
Let me change that to removal to be a bit more clear. I want to wrap things up. So any more on blog and release liaison? I'd be very happy to see some of these conversations move to Slack because I think there is some stuff to talk about. I've learned some stuff to talk about. Please do feel free to move conversations to Slack and involve more people post-meeting. Right, with that said, I am going to wrap things up. Thanks very much, folks.
That's good. Thanks a lot, Tim. See you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.